Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited that you are here, especially whom I sent a special invitation. So we are here today to launch the second series of Sada documentaries this year. It is about climate change, and we made 4 films from Yemen, which we are going to see today, and Jordan, Syria, and Morocco. And I hope you will enjoy the film today and the discussion. We are still waiting for one more guest speaker, but I will have to introduce him. The guest we are still waiting for is Abdurrahman Fadl Al-Aryani. He is the former Yemeni Minister of Water and Environment. Our second speaker is Hussein Al-Yabari. He is a Yemeni journalist, producer, and editorial staff member at Hulm Akhdar. The organization helped us producing this film. We'll moderate this discussion. Our colleague, Frederick Wairy, he is a senior fellow in the Middle East program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In the beginning, we'll show the film. 8 to 10 minutes, I think, and then by the end of the film, not by the end of the film, after the film, we'll have the discussion. Then we'll have, by the end of the discussion, time for questions and answers, and we'll show you a promotional video for Jordan film. So stay with us until the end of this session or this hour. Thank you for coming, and I hope you'll enjoy the discussion and the film.
تأثيرات المناخ على النحل. الأمطار عندما تقل نهائيا أو ما يحصلش مطر نهائي، الأزهار ما تتفتح، ما يكونش في رحيق، لذلك النحل بيتعب، ما فيش حبوب لقاح.
تعرض النحل للانجراف، آلاف الخلايا تعرضت للانجراف جراء الفيضانات والسيول.
بعض الأحيان تقل الأمطار نهائياً، ما حصل هذا السنة. إحدى الصعوبات الجفاف، ما فيش أمطار من شهر 4. يعني الأمطار الآن، يعني قبل شهرين جاء أمطار بطريقة ما شاء الله تبارك الله، ولكن في بداية عشان تزهر، علشان يطلع لنا عسل السلام الطلح، ما فيش، يعني يعتبر قحط. أكثر النحل مات مع الناس يعني في هذه الفترة.
فقط أنا أقول لك العام الماضي 150 قمح، والسنة هذه 200 قمح، بأسباب يعني الجفاف. معي المهم 150 قمح. أنا أقول لك الذي قاطعت علي السنة دي 200 والعام 150، الآن باقي معي يجي حدود 150 قمح.
وصل عدد النحالين في اليمن بناء على احصائيات 2014 الى 90,000 نحال. بيشتغلوا نحاله متنقله، يسموها نحاله متنقله، يعني ممكن يتنقل في السنه 8 مرات. بينقل خلايا من منطقه لمنطقه 8 مرات بلاحق الزهره. حاليا اللي يربحوا صح بيحصلوا فوائده، لازم ينقل من منطقه لمنطقه.
أنا من 2011 لهنا أقول لك تأثرت النحل بشكل ما يتصور، من قلة الأمطار، من الزهور يعني، والإنتاج حق الولد ما عاد عندك يعني زي ما كانت من أول، والتلوث يعني حق البيئة، حق الحروب هذا مع السموم، والموسم يعني اختلف عاد زي ما كان من أول، يجي إلى أول الصيف يعني المطارات يعني ما فيش تجلس يعني جمعت أيام 8 أيام 10 أيام ورحلت من محل لمحل.
اليمن فيها تنوع تضاريسي، تنوع مناخي يختلف باختلاف المنطقة. فالنحال يبدأ يجهز نحلة من شهر 9، يبدأ يقويه، يفعل له تغذية، يعمل له محلول سكري، يزيد ما يسمى بالريش علشان يجني له العسل. في شهر 9 10 11 12 تختلف المناطق. في مناطق يبدأ عندها السدر من شهر 9، وفي مناطق يبدأ عندها السدر في شهر 12. فالنحال المتميز يبحث عن أماكن السدر ليأخذ نحله إليها. إحنا كنحالين ضروري إن إحنا نفضي الخلايا من العسل المتبقي من المواسم الأخرى كعسل المراعي، عسل الطلح، هذه الأشياء، وننزل حقنا النحل في وادي كله سلام. التأثيرات المناخية والاقتصاد للبلد وهذه الأشياء أدى إلى تدهورها. بدأت تربي نحل العسل من 2010 إلى الآن، لدي منحلي الخاص. بدأ أهلي يدعموني في هذا المجال وبدأت أشتغل فيه. حبيت هذا المجال فتخصصت لحبي للنحل هذا.
بدأنا بخلية طبعا كانت حق المهندس الليلات يتدرب فيها، فبدأنا في الإنتاج. فمرعى على بداية الخلية انتجنا 22 خلية في خلال عام. السنة الثانية نفس الخبر 44، إلى حتى الآن في حدود 300 خلية.
من الصعوبات التي تواجه أي نحال ومنها أنا كنحالة، لما يكون المطر مثلا لمدة أيام متواصلة، النحل ما يخرج، ما يسرحش على قولتهم، يسرح النحل السارح. فنضطر ان احنا نعمل له تغذية داخلية، ونعمل له مياه، ونعمل له كل الأشياء داخل الخلية. فهذا يضر بالنحل والنحل يتعب.
عسل يعني له موسم خاص، من شهر 11 وطل. لما يقل الأمطار يعني يقل المرعى، يقل الزهور، يقل يعني ما عاد حصل زي ما تقول جناح الذي يشتغل بالولد، يغذي بالولد، يشتغل بالخلايا.
في عام 2020 سبحان الله جاء أحد كورونا، النحل عندي انتعش، لأنه ما عاد فيش تلوث ولا في ضوضاء، الناس أصبحت في بيوتها، النحل ارتاح، ما عاد فيش هذه الأشياء التي تؤدي إلى أن النحل يتناقص. بسبب أزمة كورونا هدأت كل الأسباب التي تعمل على مضايقة النحل أو عدم إنتاجه، سبحان الله. فزاد إنتاجي إلى 200 جالون من العسل، دبة الواحدة 5 لتر، فكان أكبر إنتاج بالنسبة لي.
درجة الحرارة أقول لك لما ترتفع زيادة بموسم أذار أو شباط وأنت من المناطق الصحراوية تتأثر إنه بترجع تتجازر مع بعضها، يعني خلاص تتآكل إلا ترفع إلى محل جو بارد.
لما ترتفع درجة الحرارة في الخلايا، النحل يبدأ بأجنحته يعمل زي التهوئة، يهوي على الخلية ينقص درجة الحرارة. بينما إذا في أمطار يعني أمطار متفاوتة، أمطار معتدلة تؤدي إلى تفتح الأزهار، الرحيق يكون متواجد، حبوب اللقاح، فالنحل بهذه الطريقة أنه يرتاح وينتعش. بينما إذا زادت الأمطار بالأيام أيضا النحل يتعب، يجلس محبوس، تزيد نسبة الرطوبة في داخل الخلية، يجي تعفنات.
نحن نقدر حجم التداول إلى 500 مليون دولار سنويا من العسل. نعم، إلى 500 مليون دولار سنويا من العسل. هذا حجم التداول في سوق العسل في اليمن. نحن نتوقع تراجع الرقم هذا، يمكن إلى 30% حصل تراجع بسبب الحروب، بسبب الفيضانات والسيول هذه وانجراف الخلايا. آلاف الخلايا انجرفت وآلاف النحالين تكبدوا خسائر فادحة.
ايوه، اول الموسم هذا تاثرت النحل مع نقص الامطار، جاء جفاف بجميع الجمهوريه. الحمد لله مطرنا هذا الموسم اخر السنه.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our virtual audience. As Rafia mentioned, I'm Fred Wary, a senior fellow in the Middle East program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Together with my colleagues, I'm working on a number of studies related to climate change and vulnerability in the Middle East. I want to extend a special welcome to our guest, Hussein, and hopefully Mr. Abdurrahman, the former Minister of Water and Environment. Hussein, I want to congratulate you on a really compelling film. Together, you and your collaborator, the director Mohammed, who couldn't be here. So often a lot of the discourse on climate change is a collection of abstract figures and predictions, temperature rises. But you've given us a very vivid depiction of climate change as a lived reality, right? It's also a really stunning portrayal of rural life in Yemen. I was in Taz more than a decade ago, and this was such a great reminder of how beautiful the place is. And then, of course, we learned a lot about the science and art of beekeeping as well, so thank you for that. We've got a lot to discuss. There's so many things we can extract from this wonderfully beautifully done film. I want to start with a question that every artist gets asked. Why did you make this film? What were you hoping to accomplish? And walk us through the process of filming it.
Yeah, actually, because the importance of this environmental case in Yemen, comparing to many cases and issues Yemeni environment faces. So because the value and the social and economic effect the beekeepers and the honey industry, we choose this topic. As the film mentioned, this industry value $500 million annually, and it declined by 30% in these 2 years. So this is the big concern and the main thing that drove us to take this topic.
Can you describe a little more about how Yemen got to this state? Of course, climate change by itself is significant, but the problems or the impacts of climate change are worsened, are exacerbated by government policies, by infrastructural decay, by rural, urban disparities in wealth, and especially, as your country knows all too well, by war. Can you walk us through how those cumulative effects have worsened climate change in Yemen?
We find that for sure film production and research along with environment media reports can play a critical role and make really good changes on the ground and support even the scientific researchers as well. It can aware and open the eyes of people in different places, especially in Yemen, which is a war zone, towards serious global or domestic issues, which force the both private and governmental sectors and politicians and decision makers to change and adapt their policies. We have seen how foreign media videos in Yemen made the governments and change policies toward arming the war in Yemen. Another example, we in Hulm Akhdar produced and published 5 offshore videos on the topics to the Samar visa oil tank, and which is the biggest potential threat nowadays in Yemen and the countries besides. And it became this case became none, and the UN and different foreign governments have taken action toward this potential disaster by funding the oil offloading process of Samar.
Very good. So yeah. Go ahead.
So in conclusion, video production mainly support scientific research and change, and it can change the policies. And we believe that video can reach, especially to the politicians and decision makers who don't have enough time to read to read the researches. So videos has a strong influence to the general audience because it reaches the audience in visual and audio basis with certain evidence.
Great. Yeah, you've just jumped ahead to one of my other questions about the importance of filmmaking and storytelling to spread climate awareness and to generate policy action. So it's very encouraging that your films have had that impact. Mr. Abdurrahman, I believe you're now joining us.
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. We're pleased you're here. So, yes, I would like to, first of all, sir, get your reaction to the film, but then secondly, as the former Minister of Water and Environment, if you could, walk us through some of the other climate effects that Yemen is experiencing. My cursory glance shows there's a whole range. I mean, deforestation, threats to fisheries. These are all local communities that are similarly affected, just as the beekeepers are in the film. So over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Yemen is really in a perfect storm regarding environment and existence. Climate change will affect Yemen and is affecting Yemen extremely hard in proportion to its contribution to green gas emissions. So it's really one of the worst countries that will be affected by climate change. There are actually 3 scenarios for climate change in Yemen. One scenario is very hot and very dry, which is the worst possible outcome. And one is medium, which will be hot but usual rainfall, the same rainfall that we get now, which is very difficult to predict. And then the other one is hot but more rain. Yemen is actually at the edge of everything, at the edge of the monsoon system, at the edge of geography, at the edge of Arabia, and it's at the edge because of conflicts and war. So regarding global warming, the expectation is that Yemen will temperature will increase by double the average world increase. So if the world temperature rise at the end of this century to 2 degrees or 3 degrees, Yemen will be probably 5 or 5.5 degrees. So it will be a very difficult place. And as you know, Yemen has always depended on rain-fed agriculture and groundwater. Groundwater is being depleted in a very fast manner, maybe 400% in some basins, and at least 1.5% of 1.5 times in the more lucky basins. That means that overcharge, that means that withdrawal is 4 times more than recharge. And this is very unsustainable existence. As you know, Yemen has been at war within itself and with the region for the last 7 years. And before that, it was in civil strife since 2011. And government has disintegrated more or less. There are no institutions or very weak institutions to deal with all these challenges. So we are at this situation now. If you have any more questions.
No, you've given us a very comprehensive and grim overview. I want to turn it back over to Hussein and drill down a little more on the role of local civil society, local actors. Hussein, what's your sense of their current role right now in Yemen and their ability to work, and what more could the government do to support them? What more could internationals do? Because local level grassroots involvement is just so important for climate adaptation and protecting vulnerable communities from climate change.
Actually, we usually recognize the impact and reviews of the general people after publishing the work, or after publishing the reporting, either it is filmed or graphic or article. The problem, people are not aware enough to the risk of climate change due to lack of understanding and reliable information that how some human bad practices causes environmental threats, and how mainly it's tied to their livelihood, social and economic problems. So as you know, that the environmental work in Yemen for video workers and for journalists especially is so sensitive and special. There is a lot of challenging obstacles for media film production in general, especially during this war and during the continuance of the conflict, which covering humanitarian and environmental threats are included. The challenges are different. For example, because of the divided government in Yemen and the different authorities in Yemen, they set and forced some restrictions for media production and for media production in general, along with the blockade, the entire blockade and the closing of main roads that link different governorates in each other, which causes hardness in local reaches, and it raises the danger in working, especially for journalists and filmmakers. And another thing, filmmakers and journalists are forced to obey these authorities to obtain permits for each movement that during their work, that makes the work harder and and the obstacle. Yeah. For example, I will give an example for the situation for filmmaker or journalist. The camera drones is banned in Yemen, especially in the north. So Yemen has sensitive and dangerous environment workplace for media production.
Yeah, that's really a challenging environment, and it really, it echoes a lot of what I've heard across the Arab world. I work on Libya, which is also a conflict-racked state, extremely vulnerable to climate change, and many of the things we saw in this film about farmers and local people having to abandon their traditional means of income because of extended droughts, unpredictable climatic events. I saw that in Libya. So I guess my question is to you, any means that you're able to disseminate this knowledge to other Arab actors, civil society in the Arab world? Have you had contact with other civil society groups? Do you see any applicability to Yemen's lessons to other states in the Arab world?
Yeah. Actually, our work in HaMoked especially, we can touch the impact. We can touch the reviews of not the local audience and for the international audience and international community. After we, for example, the biggest potential disaster, which is Safar, after we published our reporting and videos, we see how much the international media outlets, international organizations, and even governments be active with this big case. And they with the fast movement, they announce statements and they report about it, and they start move to take this crisis in serious. They start to fund the offloading of the sulfur tank. Actually, so this is one case. We touch the how can media and films reach to the international community.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Mr. Abdurrahman, over to you. Yemen, of course, is a major recipient of international aid, and I want to get a sense from you as a practitioner and an official responsible for the environment and water. What more could the international community do to help Yemen adapt to climate change? What specific programs could be in place? Both sort of at the national level, but also helping local civil society actors. Again, if you have any specific suggestions or advice, we are in Washington, D.C., but of course our reach is global, so both to U.S. policymakers and Western policymakers writ large.
Well, I think I would like to go back again to the situation with climate change. I would like to say that in spite of the grim picture that I gave, I'm very confident of the resourcefulness and energetic nature of the Yemenis and Yemen society to deal with any challenges that they have. And with proper leadership and selfless leadership, they can do miracles. And so I am not totally saying that nothing can be done. This is one thing. The other thing is that one issue that I noticed in the film is that they talk about the lack of or unpredictability of rain and change in the seasons, which is true. But I think the biggest challenge for beekeepers is actually the difficulty in movement. Beekeeping is a nomadic and transhumans activity. It cannot survive without beekeepers moving from the mountains to the plain to the coastal area, from the dry area to the more wet area. And with this current situation, movement has been very difficult due to the conflict and also due to very high zakah and taxation that all checkpoints charge the beekeepers. And it has been very difficult for beekeepers from all sides, the nature and the floods, the lack of rain sometimes, but also the political and social situation in the ground. So I really am sympathizing with the situation for beekeepers. This is one issue that I would like to point out, and I would have liked to see in the film, because this is actually the biggest challenge for beekeeping now. The other thing is that regarding climate change, the most important thing for Yemen now is to have peace and to have effective government. Without peace and effective government, no investment and no international donor can really do anything. All the billions of dollars that are supposed to be spent in Yemen now are going to emergency and relief effort. There are very few funds that are going to sustainable development or long-term development of any kind. And this is a tragedy, really, because Yemen actually is receiving more funds than any time in its history. But all this fund is going to charity, to saving people from dying from hunger, and all the plans and schemes that are going in Yemen are really serving the organization that are dealing on this, sadly enough. And there are no plans, no long-term plans for Yemen, because there are no governments. I mean, the governments are divided, and everybody is looking for himself, how to enrich himself, and how to survive sometimes. So, but however, I think that the Yemenis have shown, the Yemeni individuals have shown very strong resilience. And one example is that when the war started, all the electricity production and generation from the government stopped almost overnight. And within few months, few years, most of the people managed to buy solar panels and produce electricity for themselves. Not only that, but now most of the groundwater pumping for irrigation and for household is done by solar panel. I think so, renewable energy has been transformed in Yemen without the help of the government. Actually, all by initiative from the people of and individual of Yemen. What I think the international community can do is help Yemen reach peace. This is the most important thing. The other thing is that please at least divert some of the funds that are going to Yemen toward long-term development, not only for relief. Relief is, it needs a lot of money, but it's only like a drug. It doesn't help in the long run. Actually, it makes Yemenis dependent on charity and handouts, which is a recipe for disaster. Yemenis are independent, proud people, and they should be respected for that.
Very good points, and it's really great that you underscored the importance of local resourcefulness and these sort of startup programs and resilience. That is so important. But as you mentioned, ultimately it depends on peace and good governance, and there really is a challenge here with what I call the tyranny of the immediate, right? Everyone's so focused on this immediate challenge of relief that we can't program long-term into the future, and we see that repeated elsewhere in the region. Very good points from both of you. I want to turn it over now to our audience, both our in-present audience and our virtual audience, for questions. Please state your name and affiliation when you ask a question. Yes, sir.
I'm Peter Humphrey, an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. That having been said, all my degrees are in oceanography. Yemen has one of the most intriguing situations sitting off its east coast that allows for something called ocean thermal energy conversion. It's one of the few places in the world when you can actually do this, and it's never been done. So I've written a study about this, and I'm hoping that you can pass it to the minister.
I know about this. Yeah, I know about this, and we have discussed it, especially along the current of the sea during what they call al-balda, which happens in July, when the temperature of the sea can reach 18 degrees, while the temperature in the air can be in 40 degrees. And
that's why I bring this up. Global warming assists this scheme. So if you would be so kind to pass the paper to the minister, I'd be grateful.
Yes.
I do have a question. Is there any beekeeping in Socotra?
Yes, Socotra until recently has only what we call opportunistic bee collection, honey collection, which was done traditionally by stealing honey from the natural colonies. But when I was working in Socotra and I worked in Socotra from 2001 until 2010. We managed to set up a beekeeping association, and we introduced modern hives for the first time. And the adaptation of the modern hives was very easy in Socotra because they had no tradition of beekeeping at all, only taking honey from the cliffs and the trees. So beekeeping keeping is flourishing in Socotra and producing very distinctive honeys because of the distinctive and unique flora in the island. The biggest challenge in Socotra is humidity. Due to high humidity, the honey cannot be dried out naturally. So my last attempt was to try to bring dehumidifying equipment to dehumidify the honey so it can be stored and consumed in the usual way. Yes, any other question? I am here.
Very, very interesting. Any other questions from the... So we'll go to... Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentations. Noor Arafi, I'm a fellow at Carnegie Middle East Center. Just a quick question. Can you tell us more about how beekeepers have been dealing with the challenges they have been facing? Specifically, the former minister talked about the effect of war on beekeepers, which I think is a very important point, looking at the larger political context within which beekeepers have been working. So can you tell us more about how they have been dealing with these challenges?
Hussein, you want to take that? Or maybe Abdurrahman, please.
Yes, sorry, I didn't get the question.
Yeah, so the question, how have the beekeepers, how have they been dealing with the challenges specifically related to war affecting their livelihoods?
It was very difficult, as I mentioned, beside the climate change effect on the weather and climate, which result in sometimes very dry years and sometimes a lot of rain and flooding that took thousands of hives, that swept out thousands of hives in Hadramaut and other areas. The biggest immediate challenge is difficulty of movement. As I mentioned, beekeepers move. They are nomadic. They cannot stay in one place. They have to follow the flowers wherever they are, and they have to move from the hot areas to more moderate areas, from wet areas to dry areas. They have systems and traditions, very long system and traditions of movement. And now, because of thousands of checkpoints, military checkpoints by all the militias and so-called government agencies, they extract money out of them. They ask them for money because they look at them as producers, and they have money, and they have. So it has been very difficult. And many of the beekeepers that I know, they just stopped their business because of the lack or difficulty of movement and danger of movement. And in the coastal area, it's very dangerous to move because of landmines. So all these difficulties are happening to the beekeepers. And the only way is to find peace for them. They cannot survive in their areas. They have to be moved to move from Hadramaut all the way to Sana'a, and from Sana'a to Tahama and to Aden, and they cannot stay in one place.
Very interesting. So we'll take a question from our virtual audience. Do we have any?
So we have a couple of questions. So the first one is, what other venues can civil society explore for local efforts on climate adaptation?
So let's
I'm
take
sorry,
I'll repeat it. What other venues or policies can civil society pursue for climate adaptation?
Well, I mean, people are already adapting for the challenges that they are facing. One example, as I mentioned, is the renewable energy revolution that happened during the last 7 years. Regarding agriculture, there are big problems with lack of fuel, for example, or uncertainty in availability of fuel. This is why the people are moving to pumping through solar panels. And also, as you know, for the last 7 or 8 years, Yemen has been blockaded. For example, fertilizers cannot be imported, especially nitrogen, and because they think that it can be used for producing explosives. And agriculture production has suffered tremendously due to this. But people are resourceful. They are going back to their tradition using natural fertilizers, and which was abandoned in many areas for some time because of the availability of chemical fertilizers. Now people are more and more going back to their tradition, and also growing more resilient and drought-resistant crops. So people are not standing still, and the problem is that no real help is coming toward them, not from the government and not from the donors. The donors actually, by distributing free grain, they are competing with the people who are producing grain from rainfed, because the grain has become cheap and available. And I always have suggested that any help should be cash, not commodity. The commodity can destroy the local markets for anything, but with cash, people can buy stuff and can compete.
Very important points about reviving traditional knowledge and practices to build resilience. Very, very interesting. More questions from the virtual audience?
Yeah, we have one question for Hussein, and it has to do with grassroots engagement. So if you have to sum up the youth of Yemen in one sentence, how would you define their engagement with climate adaptation?
Sorry, can you give the questions in short again?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So the question says, if in one word, how would you describe youthful engagement with climate adaptation's efforts?
How to active to the environmental threats and how to active with these issues. I think from our side, we found the media is a big weapon we can define for the environment. So filmmaking, film production, video reports, even using radios, using articles, infographics about what's really challenging and threaten the environment in Yemen can give a result to people and can give a result to international community to act positively for these threats. Is it tied to your questions?
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. Any questions from the? Yes, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Abdul Rahman. In addition to honey, coffee is a very historical and important crop of production for Yemen. I'm interested to hear if coffee is also facing very, vulnerabilities in production now.
Well, I think everything is facing difficulties, but actually coffee has shown big advances in the last 5 years. And many organizations and business people are involved in promoting Yemeni coffee. That has not happened before. And now Yemeni coffee is gaining more prestige and more prominent in the world. Of course, the changes in seasons affect production, but Yemeni farmers manage to deal with that. And the most important thing now is that there are big campaign for growing more coffee by the farmers themselves in areas that has very little coffee now. People are planting hundreds of thousands of trees, which is a sign that people are very energetic and innovative in their work. when they find difficulties, they find solutions. And when they find that coffee can get them money, they are growing more coffee now. However, what they need is more support from the government and from international organizations, especially regarding knowledge about the market and knowledge about growing coffee, and especially how to grow the coffee, because it's a long tradition, sure, but many areas they have abandoned this tradition for growing coffee, and they grow cotton instead, because the cotton had immediate cash income, while coffee is a long-term business. And so people are going back, but they are making many mistakes. And I wish that there are more organizations and more government institutions that can help and promote these individual efforts. And also they can help with marketing, which is the most important issue that was lacking in the past, and now it seems to be improving a little bit.
Very interesting. Any other questions from, yes.
مرحبا أستاذ عبد الرحمن. I am رفيعة الطالعي, Sada editor-in-chief. أهلا وسهلا. Thank you for your participation. I have a question regarding the fund. You mentioned that the international community or any funders should secure fund for long-term development regarding climate change challenges in Yemen. So if that fund, or when that fund is secured, who are the partners on the ground in Yemen? If not the government, who can work with the international community or with the funders with that development fund,
yes,
long-term fund?
I agree. It's a challenge. However, that there are now big growth in NGO. There are many NGOs that are working in the ground, mainly for relief, because the relief is the biggest business now, and many individuals and organizations have set up to deal with the funding for reliefs. But I think that if there are guidance and leadership, this same organization can help in more long-term activities regarding environment protection or agriculture extension, and help in knowledge and guidance. I think Yemenis as individuals and group can work beyond the government. When the government is absent, then even tribal structure can be used very efficiently, and that has worked in the past. And I have dealt for many years, maybe 20, 30 years, strictly working with tribal structure and tribal organization, informal tribal organization, and they can do miracles and in protection of the environment, in growing trees, protecting forests. All this can be done without the government. Actually, the government sometimes has a negative effect in these issues, and if we deal directly with the local communities, we can be much more effective.
Hussein, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Dr. Abdulrahman explained a lot, and thank you for all. And if anyone wants to add more question regarding the filmmaking.
Any other questions on the filmmaking process? Anything from the virtual?
Well, I add something?
Yeah.
I think visual documentation and filmmaking is a very effective way of spreading knowledge and awareness. My first work in activism started in 1989 in helping producing a film about terraces in Yemen. It's called The Hanging Garden of Arabia. It was shown in Discovery Channel and Channel 4 in England. And I was working in agriculture research then. After working in that film, I found out that it's a very effective way of spreading knowledge. And actually, I quit my government job and started an NGO, and then got involved in activism for environment until I was appointed a minister.
Very good.
So I think young people should be encouraged to be involved in filmmaking and writing and showing their fellow citizens what are they concerned about.
That's interesting, Doctor.
Very good. Yeah, Hussein, I want to give the last word to you. Any future projects that you and your collaborator are planning or that you would like to see done? What's your next goal for filmmaking?
Yeah, we are continuous in launching campaigns and for the environmental most environmental issues. Actually, we have many environmental issues, other than the honeybees and beekeepers issues. I want to add that beside the environmental threats and the war obstacles and challenges, beekeepers are the most category suffering from the war and from the environmental threats, more than the farmers as coffee farmers.
Yes,
because as Dr. Abdulrahman mentioned, they are transferring from area to another area with the different governments, divided government, Yemeni divided governments from one party to another party. So they force for them tariffs. Maybe they ban them from movement. They stop them, and in some cases, some of areas are war areas, war zone areas. So they can't move freely. Along with the other issues and cases that we spotlight in Hulm Akhbar, and we use the visual production, we use the audio, we use the infographic, we use the articles, and we publish it worldwide and in domestic aspects. These topics illustrated in wood logging. The wood logging in Yemen is increased due to the war and due to the high price of fuel. So a lot of because of the high price of fuel and the high price of gas, the cooking gas. So a lot of families, the most of the families in Yemen depending on the wood to cook. Another thing is the random use of agriculture-based pesticides. This agriculture pesticides is mainly affects the beekeepers even because it kills their beehives, and Dr. Abdulrahman knows that very well. Another thing, the flooding, and the drought, and the drought, yeah. The lack of water, oil spill on the agriculture lands, which happening in Shabwa, and we
yes.
and we reported this in a wide way. And the crisis of trash management. All these cases are increased and be bigger because of the environmental threats in general, and especially because of the war and because of the continuous of the conflicts.
Very good. We are unfortunately running out of time. I want to thank both our guests for a really illuminating and broad-ranging discussion, that really centered the importance of local agency, local actors, local knowledge, and I think was certainly a grim picture, but also an encouraging one of highlighting local resilience. We wish you both the best of luck in your future efforts, and Hussein, especially to you with your future filmmaking. So thank you both again. To our audience, we'd like you to stay for just a few minutes, because along the lines of this session, we are going to show you a trailer for a forthcoming film on climate change in Jordan.
اليوم آثار التغير المناخي بدت واضحة في عدة قطاعات في الأردن.
آخر دراسات من الأمم المتحدة بتحكي إنه كل 10 سنوات عم بزير عنا الفريكونسي أو تردد الجفاف، عم بصير تقريبا 2.5 كل 10 سنوات.
وبدون مي يعني صعب تشتغل.
والله ما بعرف، اذا ظل الوضع زي هيك يعني اكيد راح نروح ندور لنا شغله ثانيه. يعني صعب على الوضع هذا، صعب نكمل قدام.
هاي المنطقه اللي احنا قاعدين فيها الان كانت عباره عن اراضي زراعيه منتجه لكل المحاصيل.
خلال الشتاء صرنا مؤخرا نشهد الكثير من الفيضانات الوميضيه اللي بيكون لها اثر تدمير مباشر خاصه في الوديان والقاطنين للاماكن في بعض الاماكن القريبه من الوديان.
الفيضانات هاي اللي بتصير عالية التردد طبعا بتأثر على انجراف التربة، وهذا طبعا بيأثر على الأراضي الزراعية في مناطق الشفا بالأردن ومناطق الأغوار.
اليوم الأردن ضحية من ضحايا التغير المناخي، وهو بحاجة لدعم أكبر.
Very good. So we hope you'll join us for this film, and I want to thank our audience for joining us, both in person and virtually. If you're joining us in person, we'd like to invite you for refreshments. We don't have any Yemeni honey or Yemeni coffee, but we hope you'll join us anyway. Thank you very much.
To mention, I would like, in fact, to thank, we have another former Yemeni minister in-house, Amat Ali Massoussoua. She was the human rights minister in Yemen, and she was also a journalist, so I'm very proud of this. And she, in fact, recommended Mr. Abdulrahman Fadl for this discussion, so I wanted to thank her. And I want to thank her specifically for her support for Sada. She's here in all our events. Thank you very much.